So I'll give a little bit of a broader insight into my program. And the biggest thing is that these are really personal relationships. I've known Andrew Burke for years, and Andrew's been, a huge part of my art life, and in many regards, a big part of my personal life too. Um, I've known Aaron Warner, who's my second show, for a long time. And, likewise, Aaron was a really critical part of the gallery starting to begin with. That was he was pretty central to that. Um, and then, I think from there, I have minor attractions coming up next week. And, Alan Gardner, I've known since I've moved to the UK. And I knew when I was working in publishing. And I just have so much respect for Alan and his practice that to be able to bring that into the program is a real boon. And, Alan's obviously a great artist and really looking forward to showing his work. But, I think to think a little bit more about the program specifically, um, that I can see my own image freezing. So can you still hear me? Okay, great. That when, uh, that I only do solo and maybe duo shows. There are no group shows. And importantly, every exhibition needs to be saying something. There needs to be a point. And that point may not always be my point, but it's one that I think is, the program in that sense is very directed. And I think that often I think in the broader art world, and I don't say this as a criticism, but I think that a lot of art is opaque in ways that can be, I think, critically valuable, but also leave the viewer with very little to hold on to. And, I think everything that I do very much has a reason, and is trying to communicate something. And so, I think with Andrew Burke's show, we filled the gallery full of dirt and really extrapolated from a practice that he had developed spinning in the fields near his house in Catalonia as a kind of um, how should I say, counterpoint to his life as a father and husband, and in many respects, kind of caretaker of the property that he had built, very real responsibilities. And so we had kind of transposed that terrain into the gallery, while relying on this practice of spinning as fast as he could until he fell over. And that felt like an unresolved question, but a very direct question nonetheless. With Aaron's work, a lot of Aaron's work has been focused on a certain brand of toxic masculinity that is, I would say, more uh, maybe more specific to a generation slightly older than Gen Z, a very kind of millennial take that is not the politicized far right, kind of like Andrew Tate's, but the more benign, kind of gross and skeevy like Dan Bilzerian's. And that to me was really interesting because it opened up, I think, this kind of ontological chasm between like the kind of man that I think a lot of us want to be, which is kind and thoughtful and respectful of everyone, and the kind of the far right Andrew Tate's and so on and so forth. And it's like it's created this really interesting space of like, well, what do we do with the people who I think certainly as a man myself who informed the kind of like our fantasies growing up. And what do we do? What do we do with that kind of perversity that we simultaneously want and hate? Um, and, I think Aaron has done a really great job at probing that and asking those questions. And then with Alan's work, I mean, I think Alan is always very concerned about what it is to make a painting, what the practice of painting, could possibly entail, and has wrapped a lot of spirituality into that. And for minor attractions, we're actually building a shrine, um, which is going to operate through activation by the viewer. So it is a shrine that the viewer can purchase to then be remade to whatever they want. And that is, I think, asking questions of the market, asking questions of use value. And I think the art gods that we pray to is very interesting. So, I mean, a lot of it comes from these personal relationships, and just a really foundational belief in the people that I'm working with. I am so incredibly fortunate to to be, I think, surrounded by really great people.